You're listening to TBR Radio Presents the Dixie Heritage Hour with your host, the Director of Dixie Heritage, Dr. Ed DeVries.
Обращение американца ко всем русским. Автор послания Allen Armentrout.
What you just heard was a Russian news broadcast. We only played a few seconds of it there for you because we understand that probably about 95 or more % of our listening audience do not speak Russian. But just wanted to put that out there so that you could know that our guest today, Allen Armentrout, made news not only here in the United States, but he also made the news in Russia. Of course, Allen was our guest last week, so our regular listeners already know who he is. And Allen Armentrout was the young man who went to the Charlottesville Robert E. Lee Monument, and he stood there for several hours, and he saluted the monument dressed as a Confederate soldier and carrying Confederate colors as he was spit on, as he was assaulted, as he was verbally abused. Just a tremendous young man who has stood for our history and for our heritage. And so it was our honor to interview him and to get to know him a little bit last week, to have him as our guest. And now this week we're going to play the continuation of that interview. And we're also going to have some footage of him speaking to the Milton, Florida City Council on behalf of our history and Confederate symbolism there in Milton, Florida. And so you're going to enjoy the second half of the Allen Armentrout interview. He's going to go into a lot more detail. The last interview was more of a kind of get-to-know-you interview. We talked a lot about his Confederate ancestors and kind of what motivated him to go to Charlottesville and also what motivated him to go to Louisiana. He was there standing with those statues when they were torn down, when Mayor Mitch Landrieu had those torn down. He was there. And he kind of talked about some of his frustrations he had. Here's this guy out there on the front line fighting for our heritage, fighting for our monuments. And where's the Sons of Confederate Veterans? Not only are they not standing there with him, they're actively resisting him and fighting him and making it harder for him to do the job that God had called him to do, to defend our history and honor our forefathers and so forth. And it really frustrated him, and he had every right to be frustrated. And so anyways, he talked a little bit about that in the last interview, and he's going to talk a little bit more about that. That subject's going to come up again in today's discussion as well as kind of what he's doing now and how he's kind of moved forward from what he originally made the news with, being his stand there in Charlottesville, some of the things he's doing now. So anyways, here's the continuation of our interview with Allen Armentrout. So you were in New Orleans. You felt like you were there alone. So having done that, it wasn't just so Charlottesville wasn't just an idea. You know, I think I'm going to go to Charlottesville. I think I'm going to stand at the Robert E. Lee statue. You had already done it in New Orleans. You'd already been harassed by the police. You'd already been threatened with arrest. You'd already felt like, where's, kind of like Elijah, when he's like, where's everybody, And so basically you made a decision not just to go to Charlottesville, but you made the decision to go and do the same thing again, probably realizing that the results would be the same. You would endure more harassment. You would endure more potential threat of arrest. You would endure more, being the only person there. What made you decide to do it again and not just encourage somebody else to go do it this time?
Because no one else will go and do it. That was the problem. Was that it was like there was a need, and if I wouldn't go, who else would?
Right.
It's again. I'm not hating on any, because I know there's probably a lot of people that are going to watch this and say, he doesn't know me. I go out and do this and do that, and I fully acknowledge that those people are out there that, but there's a lot of people out here who don't. And I'd say the overwhelming majority of so-called supporters don't do what needs to be done. They were unwilling to fight. Can we come back to your question? What was your question again, sir? I'm sorry.
Well, that was the question, is, what possessed you to do it again? Since
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's just, for a while there, honestly, I don't want to say it was fun, more or less, but there's a sensation when you're using your rights and freedoms, and you're going out there and you're doing something that you know you have a legal right in your Constitution to do, and you know that no matter whether people don't like it or whether the police department doesn't like it, that they can't do anything to you. And it does give you a sense of freedom to know that you're going out there with an extremely controversial flag representing something that's been misconstrued, where many people think it's about racism, hatred, and things like that. And you're going out there representing the truth of it, whether people want to acknowledge that or not. There is a really cool sense of freedom that you can stand out there, you can represent your way of belief, the way you think, and the police department can't come up to you and say, you're under arrest for freedom of speech. You know what I mean? Like, it's a really cool, and then
one of those constitutional rights is also expressed in the First Amendment, besides the freedom of speech and the freedom of assembly, is the right to a redress of grievance, the right to petition our government for a redress of grievance. And that's also a right that Allen has exercised recently when he spoke to the City Council of Milton, Florida. Milton is a town. It's over there near in the Florida Panhandle, not too far from Pensacola. And he spoke to the Milton City Council in defense of some Confederate symbols that the City Council was considering abandoning, getting rid of. And so we've got the film footage of it, and he gives quite a spectacular speech to the City Council there in Milton, Florida. And he quotes from my book. So I got to say, I'm flattered that he would quote from my book, The Truth About the Confederate Battle Flag. Speaking of which, go to our website, www.dixieheritage.net, and give us your email address, and I will send you absolutely free of charge a copy of my book, The Truth About the Confederate Battle Flag. And with that little commercial aside, let's go ahead and have the video footage here of Allen Armentrout speaking to the Milton, Florida City Council, and then we'll come back and continue our actual interview with
Prepared speech. But we're trying to defend the Confederate symbol and the City of Milton seal. But I'll just read my prepared speech that I made up. I'm here to defend my symbol of pride, my heritage, my freedom, and my country. You see, on the surface, anyone with no understanding of the war for Southern independence would commonly believe the lies spread over the decades, but simply say the war was over slavery, and the North was right and the South was wrong. I'm here to tell you that is a lie, and that the flag will continue to fly, regardless of the decision made tonight. There are flags flying everywhere, because men and women of the South are, across the United States, not just the South, are awakening and seeing the true colors of our government. They see the treachery committed against the Constitution and the true attack on every historical and Christian fundamental that this country stands for. Even with the status of our country, there are hundreds of thousands of people everywhere, of all cultures, raising our battle flag to make a statement, not of racism, but to reclaim our country. Why? Why must we remove the Confederate flag and Confederate symbols? Because they're racist? No, because they represent truth. You see, the Confederate federal flag is a threat to unlimited government. The federal, state, and even local governments everywhere are making actions that are unconstitutional. But then there's people flying Confederate flags, standing in the way of people, yelling no. We have a Constitution, and we have God-given rights that cannot be taken away. And we also have people that are fighting for those rights. People say the flag is offensive, and I offend people by flying. Well, they're absolutely right. I offend every pinko, liberal, federalist, left-wing communist person out there. And I'd like to close with a quote from Double Earl Douglas, a black journalist from Charleston, South Carolina, who says, "If hate had been the prevailing emotions between the races, it's a safe bet that the Confederacy would have never been born. Fortunately, there was love, understanding, and compassion, and the two greatest lies perpetrated by history are that the South instigated the war, and that the war was fought by the North for the purpose of freeing the slaves. The Negro was merely used as an excuse for that war, while the real reason for it was reflected in every area of our lives, where the tentacles of government form the bars of a new slave. No, don't furl that Confederate battle flag. Let it wave all across the South to remind Americans that there exist a people here yearning for liberty, freedom, and independence that will not be denied. Let it fly as a testimony to real men and real women who would rather work and fight than shed tears and beg for governmental charity. End quote. You see, the flag is a flag of pride, it's a flag of valor, it's a flag of heritage, and it's a flag that represents the sovereignty of Christ, the St. Andrew's Cross, which is born in that flag. The real question here is, will you remove the Confederate flag? Will you show the residents that the city of Milton has surrendered to political correctness used by a tyrannical government? Or will you vote to keep that flag in the sea?
Your map software may be outdated. Please update it to the latest version.
Anyway, but as I continue, the real question here is, will you remove the flag? Will you show the residents that the city of Milton has surrendered to political correctness used by a tyrannical government? Or will you vote to keep that flag in the city seal, to show that the city of Milton is proud of their heritage, of all cultures and backgrounds, that are united as Americans fighting for their liberty and independence, that will continue to do so to the day they die? It's a slippery slope that we're on today in our country. Everything's being attacked. Anything that's Christian or is a historical fundamental that our country was founded upon. Our founding fathers, the Constitution, the Confederacy, that woman in Kentucky, as he mentioned, anything Christian. Christ has been taken out of schools. It's a big attack, okay, on everything that this country stands for. And the Confederacy just happens to be something that I'm proud of and I'm fighting for, just like I do Christ. And we gotta take back our country, And the Confederate battle flag is a flag of a mentality that says, like that man says, they're yearning for liberty and independence, like our founding fathers did. And taking down that Confederate flag is going to say, hey, the city of Milton has rendered to the political correctness that's just sweeping across our country, everywhere, not just the South. And I know some of you are very concerned by the historical, did it fly or not fly, but, and putting the stars and bars up, but why not the Third National? Well, that has the Confederate flag on it. Exactly right. That's why I don't think some of y'all want the Third National flying, is because y'all want, I'm not saying everyone, but I'm just saying it's an attack on that symbol, okay? Because when people see that, I'm just speaking from the heart, when people see that Confederate flag, they ask why. What does that flag represent? People see it and they say, well, that was a flag that flew over a group of people who wanted liberty and freedom, like our founding fathers did. And then they ask, well, what did the North fight for? Well, the North fought for taxes and oppression and unlimited government. And they say, well, that's what's going on in our country today. So it's an attack on truth from all aspects. And that's about all I have to say. I don't want to take up any more of your time, but I'm not doctrinally sound because I'm natively from North Carolina. I'm doing college down here, and I'm not doctrinally sound or fundamentally sound on the facts and history of the panhandle of Florida. But I just know that the battle flag anywhere is just a statement of people who are proud of where they came from, and it's a statement of what they want and what they want to keep. So I don't know if y'all have any questions for me.
Where are you from?
I'm natively from High Point, North Carolina. Yes, sir.
Where do you live now?
I go to college down here.
You have any connections to Milton?
No, sir.
No further questions.
All right. Thank you, sir. Anyone else? All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You probably picked up on it there as he was asked at the end of the interview there by the city council. He was asked, did he have a direct connection to Milton? The truth is that at the time he spoke to the city council, he was a resident of Pensacola, which is not too far from Milton, but again, it's not Milton. And so essentially what probably just happened is the city council probably just dismissed everything that he said because he was a non-resident, which is really sad. But the truth is there should have been people from Milton, Florida, who should have been there speaking to these things. And God bless Allen Armentrout. He drove over to Milton from Pensacola, and he put himself out there, and hopefully something that he said will stick in the mind of one or two of those council members and affect their vote, even if there are other council members who would totally dismiss everything he said out of hand, or use the fact that he was a Pensacola resident and not a Milton resident to dismiss the truth that he spoke that day. Anyways, let's get back to our interview with Allen, and he's going to continue just telling us a little bit about what it was that motivated him to go to New Orleans and then to do it again in Charlottesville.
I don't know. I don't know what it's hard to explain, because I know a very few people, maybe our soldiers, have in some light experienced what it's like to fight for freedom, to know that what you're doing is not just for yourself, but it's part of something bigger. You know.
So when you got to Charlottesville, did you get there before or after all of the Marxist protesters did?
So it was after. Everybody thinks, well, a lot of news reporters put out there that I was there during the rally, and that's not true. I was there several days later. It was still pretty. It was like an earthquake had just happened, and if anybody moved the wrong way, something else would happen. But I decided I wanted to go up there because it felt like on TV that they were going to tear down the Robert E. Lee Memorial. And in some way, I wanted to protect it, see it in the event that it came down, because I was there and people were saying, in New Orleans, people were saying, oh, it won't come down. It's been there for decades and blah, blah, blah. And then here came the cranes, you know. And so I wanted to be able to go there and see it, because I know that these monuments were famous. You know, the artists that painted them were just geniuses and world-renowned artists, and I wanted to go see these monuments. I wanted to pay my respects to Lee. I feel like I diverted from your question.
Well, what I was trying to find out is if you had to go through a sea of protesters just to get to the monument.
No.
Or...
So when I first got there, you could feel the tension in the air. I mean, it was like a bomb had went off in that town. You could just, I mean, emotionally, I mean, you could sense it. People were still, you could just sense it. But there was, I mean, when I first got out of my car, I loaded my weapons and got everything good to go. And
so your weapons were loaded when you were there?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And then when I was,
and the reason I asked that question is because people, you know, have commented on your absolute restraint in not using them. And
well, that's one
of course,
reason,
if they were not loaded, that would have explained the restraint. But since they were loaded, then you know, obviously you did exercise a lot of restraint.
Well, that's one reason I brought them too, is because, you know, I had no intention to use that firearm unless someone actually intentionally tried to hurt me or harm me or someone else. Because I knew that people were running over other people with cars, and that, you know, people don't have no regard for human life anymore. And I was telling another journalist, I said, you know, people shoot people for $30 in a cash register at a gas station. You know, what would it matter to them if they shot, you know, a kid trying to honor his ancestor with a flag that to them means hatred and, you know, and stuff like that? It'd mean nothing. They'd just drive by in a Tahoe and whip out a couple of pistols and shoot me dead in the street and drive off. It wouldn't mean nothing to them. You know, life means nothing to a lot of people anymore. Anyway, so I wanted to bring some weapons as a deterrent. I know a lot of people, I've had some of my friends tell me, you shouldn't have brought the AR. That just kind of radicalized you. And I said, well, would you have gone into a hostile environment like that without being armed? You know, without any kind of way to defend yourself? You know, I think to myself, what would have happened if I didn't have those weapons? I could have been shot. I could have actually been physically assaulted. I think a lot of those people at Charlottesville that were surrounded by me, I think they intentionally wanted. I think a lot of the in-your-face type stuff was just a way to antagonize me, to eventually break me and make me do something. I told another journalist, I said, you know, the only reason that I got put on national television was because they wanted me to snap. They wanted me to do something. They said, here's this guy with an AR-15, the evil weapon, and he's got a Confederate flag, and eventually he's going to swing, or he's going to draw, or he's going to shoot somebody, or he's going to do something, and we're going to get it on national television, and we're going to air that for the next week or two and say, crazy man, Confederate flag shoots, and then they wouldn't show the 2 hours of ill treatment toward me. They'd just show the 10 seconds of me retaliating.
Right.
Our lead-in to our show last week was about a 90-second clip from the Associated Press, and it was just a sample of the abuse that Allen endured as he was standing there before the Robert E. Lee Memorial in Charlottesville. And we're just going to go ahead and play that again, just so that those of you who have not listened to last week's radio show, kind of a little bit of what he had to endure. And maybe for the rest of you, this is just kind of a little bit of a refresher, but I think it's a good context here. So I'm going to stick it in here, and then we'll be back with our interview, and Alan's going to talk more about what was going on in his mind and in his heart as all of this was going on.
Terrorists go home! 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 Terrorists go away! Terrorists go away! Terrorists go away! Terrorists go away! Drinking water? Is that what you're doing? Dude, I guess you can get back. You have a home to go to. You have people. There are people who are dead here and are injured in the hospital and you are fucking here doing this, but you can just stand up and get terrorists go home! Get out of here! Terrorists go home! Tear it down! Tear it down! Tear it down! Tear it down! Racists go home! Racists go home! Racists go home! Racists go home! Racists go home!
But it's not patriotic now.
I wanted to honor my ancestors today, sir. They need to know that what they fought for wasn't slavery or oppression of people.
Where were they and where are they?
Thank you, sir.
Flag is back there.
When
Put it in there.
innocent people are being terrorized by him and his cronies. So,
You're doing what you asked. Have a seat, sir.
can't walk out of the park by yourself, huh? So proud and brave.
You want another day like Saturday, don't you? You should be ashamed of yourself.
That blood is on your hands,
No, it's
not
But
mine.
I think to myself, if I hadn't had those firearms, they could have jumped on top of me and started mauling me. Because if they had done that, I'm just being honest, if they had done that to me, if I had 10, 15 protesters on me, punching me in the face and assaulting me like that, someone would have gotten shot, And I think they knew that, so that's why they didn't do that. Because I feel like by myself, with no friends or no one out there to help protect me, that to them it wouldn't matter if they had dogpiled me and started beating me up,
Right.
I
So
think
what exactly did they do to you?
So basically got as close as they could and verbally assaulted me. Some of them brushed up against me, started pushing me a little bit. Some of the officers would step in and say, he has his personal space. You're not allowed to get this close. And they kind of disregarded him on that fact. Some of them whispered things in my ear, which were kind of gruesome, which obviously weren't on tape. But, yeah. And they just call me a terrorist and, then I tell you, them people don't know. They call me a terrorist. I'm like, you people are crazy. A terrorist would have set off a bomb here and killed everybody, Like, then they were saying, what was it, racists go home and all that stuff. Like,
Get the clock here, so I'm going to go ahead and interrupt once again, and we're going to have a brief commercial from our sponsor, the Barnes Review, and then we'll be back with our interview with Allen Armentrout. If you love listening to the Dixie Heritage Hour, then I know that you'll love reading the Barnes Review. The Barnes Review is one of my favorite magazines. I began reading the Barnes Review long before they became a sponsor here on the program. In the Barnes Review, you will read vignettes of man, from the prehistoric to the very recent,
From forgotten races and civilizations to first-person accounts of World War II and the late Cold War, there's just not a more interesting magazine published today, nor a more significant and important subject than real history. So if you'll visit www.barnesreview.org, that's www.barnesreview.org, you can find out how you too can become a subscriber to the Barnes Review. You can subscribe to receive the Barnes Review by mail, or you can subscribe to receive the Barnes Review electronically in PDF editions. Or you can subscribe to receive both. That's what I do. So visit www.barnesreview.org and subscribe to the Barnes Review.
So I guess you said there was just one Charlottesville police officer there by you?
No, there were several. There were, I think, about 4 to 5 officers there. Initially, it was one, and then I think he evaluated the situation and then decided, hey, we need some backup. And so eventually the police sergeant and I guess his entire watch came out. So, yeah.
So the pictures that I've seen of people in your face, holding the middle finger in your face and different things, the pictures that I've seen, it appears that pretty much all of the harassment that you endured was at the hands of white people.
Right.
I didn't see any pictures of black people or Hispanic people or non-white people, harassing you. Maybe there were a few, but I didn't see any of those pictures.
Right. Well, there was one, the black lady that was there saying, like she was the very vocal one in the video. But other than that, yeah, it was primarily white folks.
And so how did that play in your mind?
Look, it's again, like, it just showed to me, like, it's not a racial thing. It's a political position thing. It's like this flag represents, in my mind, freedom from tyranny, small government, low taxes, individual states' rights, just resistance to the federal government and to tyranny in general. And I would say, for the most part, if I had to assume, the political positions of the people that were surrounding me were more or less socialist or communist, possibly Marxist, were pro big government, high taxes, and so, yeah, I really think a lot of this has to do with the liberal mindset, the Antifa crowd. I don't really think a lot of this I think the whole race thing has just been kind of the scapegoat, has been kind of, I think if you really talked to honest black folks and asked them, does this offend you? They'd probably be like, it's not a big deal for me. I've lived here for X amount of years and this is just part of our culture, so.
Right. But that's kind of the point that I'm getting at, because if you look at a lot of the people who were harassing you, they were white people in the South. So there's a pretty good chance that they shared the same ancestry. And so obviously, the ancestry, if the ancestry is there, and in some cases it may not have been. I mean, I'm not going to take the time to do an Ancestry.com search on every Antifa protester. But a good number of them would have to share our ancestry and our heritage, which, at least in my mind, it causes me to think, why is this person rejecting their ancestry and their heritage? Why are they opposing it rather than supporting it?
I mean, if you've been told something ever since you were a kindergartner in school that Lincoln was this god, I mean, that's what you're gonna be a product of your environment. You can take a child that has a direct lineage to George Washington, Robert E. Lee, Thomas Jefferson, and Jefferson Davis, and it doesn't matter what your bloodline is. If what you're taught about them is not in accordance to what the truth is, they're going to turn out to be like one of those people. They're going to think that, oh yeah, even though my lineage was this, he was a racist, and I'm, they'll look at it as like a badge of shame, not of a badge of honor. Because I've had people, who was the general? She said she was related to. I forgot, but she came up to me and she gave me a prominent general's name. It's famous in history. Just his name slips my mind. And she said, I'm a direct descendant of this guy, but what he did was wrong, and he fought for slavery, and I don't like that, and I'm ashamed of that ancestry and lineage in my history. And I was like, okay, well, that's a shame, But that's where a lot of our reconstructed Southerners are. That's just what happens,
President Trump made kind of the same point in a press conference shortly after the whole incident there in Charlottesville, and the president was attempting to defend Allen and others who were standing on behalf of our Confederate heritage, and the news media, the reporters in the room, really did not want for him to do that. They were trying to get other statements from him. But we're just going to play just a few seconds of that, then we're going to go to a quick commercial, then we're going to be back with our interview with Allen Armentrout.
Excuse me. I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name. No, George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him? Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. Now, we're going to take down his statue. So you know what? It's fine. You're changing history. You're changing culture. And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly. Now, in the other group also, you had some fine people, but you also had troublemakers. And you see them come with the black outfits and with the helmets and with the baseball bats. You had a lot of bad people in the other group too.
Burger one might be crazy, but I ain't dumb. Crazy cooter coming at you. Hey y'all, got your ears on? Well, I got some news for you. We're here at our brand new Cooters in the Country store in Sperryville, Virginia. Good old Sperryville, where Cooters started many years ago. Folks are coming from all over Hazard County. And we're going to have a grand old time with good music, good food, and best of all, good friends. Hope y'all can be there. Whoop, here come Enos. Huck got Cletus with her. I'm down and I'm gone.
Were you homeschooled, public school, Christian school?
Christian school.
What curriculum did they use in the Christian school?
So my young adulthood, I used Bob Jones' curriculum, and then I used Abeka in my...
Those were the answers I was expecting to hear, one of those two, and in your case, both. And I'm familiar with how they teach history in both of those curriculums. You would have got a better history education in a public school. But anyways.
Yeah, well.
But I know that those two curriculums are very anti-Southern in their approach. And you went to Pensacola Christian College, which you were taking college history courses that were anti-Southern in their approach. And, of course, you've endured all the media of the last 20-some years of your life and all of that as well. But yet you overcame that, and you're proud of your heritage, and you're willing to take a stand for it.
Yeah, history classes in college were a lot of fun. I loved debates. I'd raise my hand and would ask a lot of questions that I already knew the answers to. But I'd just say, like, well, wait a minute, and my professors would just be like, okay, Alan, like, thanks for disproving, like, everything I've said. Like, all of my professors were, like, these lovers of Lincoln, and you could, like, I'd ask him a question, like, well, why did he do this, and why did he do that, and, why did he violate the Constitution, like, 26 times, and, why did he not say he cared about the slaves? I thought he cared about the slaves, and half the time I'd say stuff to him, and they were like, I didn't know that, and so I came to class usually like sometimes with printed material that I would like quote in class and stuff because I felt bullied, not bullied, but not singled out, but like I was the only one that saw it from my way of view. I remember I had a guy in my class. He was like, the South was evil, and the Confederate soldiers fed black babies to alligators and stuff, and I was like, whoa, like, what? Like, can we stop for a minute? Because everyone kind of nodded their heads like, yeah, that's what happened. And I was like, no, hold on. Like, wait a minute. But yeah, history classes in college were a lot of fun because I was the Southern guy. Everybody knew that. So
I went to college up north.
Okay.
But the chancellor of the college was from Texas, and so he would, on holidays like Memorial Day, Labor Day, 4th of July, Veterans Day, he would have the the organist in the chapel. He would tell her to play the national anthem, and she would play Dixie.
Yeah.
And of course, we were in Indiana, so all the Yankees up there would go. And one Sunday morning, I can't remember what holiday it was. He looked over to the organ. He said, "Sister Colston," he said, "play the national anthem." And she started to play Dixie. And this was in a church service with 20,000 people in it. And all of these old Yankee women just their hats started falling off. And we had I had a history professor. Actually, I had my history teacher. You know who Dr. Bill Grady is?
Mm-hmm.
And so I had history from Dr. Grady. And so even though Dr. Grady grew up in New York, he somewhere along the way he had gained an appreciation for the Confederacy. So it was a different environment. But there was a time in this country when you could have a discussion on these things.
Yeah.
And even if and I would say most of the academic world, and there were exceptions. There were men like Dr. Grady, who I had for history. Of course, there were men who, like Dr. Clyde Wilson at the University of South Carolina. There were exceptions to the rule, of course. But most of academia was probably more pro-Union than pro-Southern. But yet, for decades in this country, we were able to have discussion in academic centers on these matters. And now it seems like it's no longer even up for discussion.
Right. There's these pre-established facts that if you disagree with, you're a racist or something's wrong with you now.
So you went to Charlottesville. You endured everything that you endured. You would think, and based on the reaction that you received, I'm going to say that perhaps it was exceptional parenting, perhaps it was exceptional pastoring in the church that you grew up in. I'm going to say that your encouragement in your Christianity, which was very much tested there in Charlottesville, but your encouragement in your Christianity came from your parents or from your pastor or from your local church and not from the college. And the reason I say that is because you should have gone back to school as a hero. I mean, if anything, the school should have seen you come back and said, "Wow, we've done a really good job with this guy." I mean, he could stand there for the time that he stood there and endure what he endured. And, the only person who endured more and did it more gracefully was Jesus. But that wasn't their response. They expelled you.
Yeah, I might have the same sentiment as that.
So what was that like to, or did you see it coming? Or, did you go there knowing you would get in trouble at school when you came back? Or were you totally blindsided by the expulsion?
Let's just say that after it made national news, I expected the phone call.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about as much as I'll leave it. So
okay.
I knew that, like I said, I knew that once it went national, like it went to CNN and all that, I was like, something's going to happen.
So I know that you were able to transfer your credits to another school, and you were able to finish your year, and you were able to do the things you needed to do, but now you need to pay for them.
So I'm still in college. I'm finishing my senior year of criminal justice, the minor in history. I finished... when I was there, I had completed 101 credits, and when I transferred, they took 90, which was just a minor setback, not very bad at all. I need 120 to graduate. I'm up to, I'm at 97 credits right now. I'm finishing up a class, which will bring me to 100, and I've got 4 classes for the fall. I have to double up some online classes. and then I take a few in the spring, and I'll be done. I'm planning on graduating in May of 2019. But yes, sir, paying for them is still kind of a question of how. I think the Lord will bring the money in. I have faith in that. He brought me to this college, and he is letting me graduate. So I know that this is His will. He'll help me pay for it. So I appreciate these opportunities He's allowing me to in some way advertise about that.
So is there some vehicle that somebody could use if they wanted to make a contribution towards your tuition?
Probably the best way would be to PayPal me.
Okay.
Because from there I directly transfer it to my savings account. You know, a lot of people say, well, why don't you just do a GoFundMe or whatever? I've set up 2 GoFundMes, and one was done by a third party and was shut down, and then I did one myself, and it was also shut down. So I've tried to do some fundraising websites, and actually the first one I raised over $6,000 in like 24 hours when this all first started happening. And they shut it down and sent all the contributions back to the donors. And that was kind of a big bummer because that would have really, really helped pay for my college. Would be the best way to just voice my email right now, what my email address is.
Yes, sir, if you want to voice it, and then if you could also text it to me, I'll be able to put it out in some other forums as well.
So my email is allarmy, ALLARMY, @live.com. And then just go on PayPal and enter in that email, and then I guess send as a gift. And I hate I hate asking for money or anything like that. I try to stay very, very humble about this whole situation that's happened in Charlottesville. I know a lot of people call me a hero or this or that, but really, I try to really stay humble about it. I don't feel that I've done anything really. I just feel like I did what the Lord called me to do, and if in your opinion you feel led of the Lord or however to help me in my pursuit to finish my college degree, which again would have been 4th year, which would have been, I had it all paid for. It would have been free. I would have been good to go. But now I'm trying to figure out a way or asking the Lord to help pay for my 4th year.
So did you have a scholarship at PCC, or had you prepaid your tuition, or how did that, or because you said it was paid for?
So they had I can't go into too much detail, but basically I can talk about their what they advertise today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I won't talk about my actual situation. I'm not allowed to. But what I can say is what they advertise right now is basically a 4th year free program. So if you went to their school for 3 years and lived and worked on the campus for 3 years, then their 4th year would be the tuition, room and board, and all that would be paid for. And I was underneath that plan.
Okay.
And so
essentially, it was kind of like having a scholarship but it was only
right.
effective there. So yeah, it wasn't transferable, obviously.
Right.
And so yeah, that could see and I could see where that would have really created a situation for you. But yeah, hopefully, a lot of people, having gone to Pensacola Christian College, you know who Dr. Johnny Pope is.
Oh yeah, very good man.
And years ago, Brother Johnny told me, he said there are all kinds of people. He said, they would like to go to the mission field. He said, but they never will. You would think that they would take a short-term mission trip. He said, they take a vacation. He said, so if they're going to take a 7-night cruise, why not take a 7-night, mission trip down to Mexico or down to Guatemala or somewhere? He said, but ultimately, he said, they won't. He said, but they'll write a check and send somebody else.
Right.
And so he said, and I guess if that's all they're willing to do, and as long as they're willing to do it, and as long as there are others who are willing to go in their place, he said, I guess, missions works.
Right.
And, it's the same thing perhaps with Confederate heritage. There are all kinds of people who would see the picture of you down in Charlottesville and think, if I were younger, I would have liked to have done something like that.
Right.
Of course, they never will. But, maybe they'll write the proverbial check, and even if it's just a few dollars, it'll help you.
It would pay for books or anything.
Yeah,
I know. I just keep interrupting, but we do need to break for another commercial. Just a few words from our sponsor, the American Free Press, and then we will finish our interview with Allen Armentrout.
If you're like me, and I'll bet you are because you're listening to the Dixie Heritage Hour, you like to be on the cutting edge of honest news and accurate information. You like to hear about the latest financial trends and to know what's happening around the world and right here in the United States, the things that can directly impact you, your life, and the life of your family. And if you're like me, you do not rely on the mainstream media to obtain this information because, frankly, you know that you just can't trust them. Fortunately, there is an alternative news outlet with a long-established track record for honesty and integrity, and that is the American Free Press. AFP is the preeminent alternative independent news source for honest, hard-working, truth-loving Americans. AFP is the antithesis of the controlled, lamestream media. AFP is employee-owned and has been so since its founding. Because of that, AFP never has and never will allow advertisers or special interests or big money to dictate what appears in the pages of the American Free Press newspaper. 26 times a year, the American Free Press newspaper can be delivered to your door, packed with the kind of uncensored news that I know you're going to appreciate. AFP covers the stories and tells the truth that the lamestream media is frankly scared to touch. And AFP offers real, on-the-scene reporting and commentary, the likes of which you will never see in the Washington Post, the New York Times, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, or just about any other lamestream news source that you can think of. That's right, there's only one national populist news weekly staffed by an unsurpassed team of veteran investigative journalists who will dare to rip the veil off of many of the major news stories that are being censored and suppressed by the big money controlled media monopoly. And that's the American Free Press. AFP publishes exciting, in-depth, uncensored news and information that's grassroots and patriotic, information that Americans need to know in order to combat the growing police state. AFP stands firmly against the New World Order and against those who are working to establish a global plantation under the rule of a powerful few. In short, AFP is your voice. If you have any doubt why they want to silence AFP, you must be relying on the lamestream media for your news, and folks, that's a big mistake. If you're ever dissatisfied with your subscription to the American Free Press, their guarantee is that you just drop them an email and they will gladly refund the unused portion of your subscription. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.americanfreepress.net. Once again, www.americanfreepress.net. And find out about the American Free Press. Do it today.
Was there anything else you wanted to tell us about any of this that I didn't ask you about or that you didn't get an opportunity to say? Or
Well, I just want to thank the Lord for all these opportunities that I can have to talk to people like you and other journalists, where I can acknowledge Him in this whole process. How, Satan tried to take this situation and ruin me forever. And in reality, the Lord used it in a mighty, mighty way. And I've been able to talk with people and people from all over the world have been able to come to me who I would have never met if it hadn't been for what I've done. And I hope that in some way, in some person's real, seeing this on TV or can see Christ in me and possibly could get saved from it. And, see my Christian character and the restraint from being, treated that way from those people. And I'm just very thankful. The Lord's done a lot for me, and I'm very thankful. And I take no credit for any of it. I take no credit for any of my successes after all of this has happened. I take no credit for the college, me getting into another college that accepts credits, that's accredited. I take no credit for the job I have now, which is very successful, and the Lord's blessed my life, and I'm very thankful for that. And I couldn't have made it without Him. So,
right. Well, I hear the sirens. So are the cops coming for you?
Yeah, they heard the NSA's on me now.
Yeah.
So they tracked our conversation down. So.
All right. Well, I appreciate you chatting with us today, and
oh yes, sir. And it was a pleasure getting to talk to you and get to know you some. And I hope that if you have any other questions or any other thoughts you want to run by me or whatever, just call me again or text me. Okay. Thank you so much. I really would appreciate that.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, God bless, Brother Allen.
God bless you too, sir.
Right.
Well, that was our interview with Allen Armentrout, and I hope that you enjoyed getting to know Allen just a little bit in these last 2 weeks of interviews. And just a great kid. In fact, the first time I talked to Allen on the phone in kind of preparation for setting up this interview, I had called Allen's father, actually, in North Carolina, and I'd asked him, I said, Mr. Armentrout, I'd like to interview your son on the Dixie Heritage Hour. And he said, I think he would like to do that. He said, can I have him call you? And I said, yes. And so later that night, my phone rings. Of course, my wife and I had gone out to dinner. I can't remember where we'd gone. I think we went to a taco place or something like that. But we'd gone out to dinner. And we were in the truck and we were driving home. And as we were driving home, the phone rang. And no one answers the phone in their truck anymore. You've got Bluetooth now. So I pushed a little button on the steering wheel. And of course, the phone call is being played over the stereo speaker, so my wife can hear the phone call as well. And I'm talking to Allen. I think we talked about 20 minutes or so. And then I remember when we pulled into the driveway, and my wife told me, she said, you know what? She said, I've never met him, but he's just a sweet young man. I could tell just by the few minutes you were talking to him that he is just a sweet, godly young man. And he is. Allen is just a great kid, and we're glad to give him any exposure and help that we can. Hopefully, our listeners will dig in just a little bit and help towards his university tuition. Help him with that and his living expenses as he's attending university away from home. But another thing that I want to do right now at the end of this broadcast is I want to give a shout out and a thank you to the Charlottesville Police Department. A lot of times we are critical of the police, and when we are, it's deserved. I'm just going to say it. There are a lot of bad cops out there. But what we saw today is that there are also a lot of good cops. If you noticed in the video that we saw there in Charlottesville, that's all I've got to say is that video showed us that there are still some good cops out there. And I want to say thank you to the Charlottesville Police Department for protecting this young man as he was out there exercising his First Amendment and Second Amendment rights on the public square in Charlottesville. In so many other places, the police are arresting the good guys and letting the bad guys go free. And that wasn't the case in this incident. Y'all did a great job of protecting Allen, of helping him to exercise, like I said, his First and his Second Amendment rights. In fact, I was watching a news commentary that we did not share clips of in our radio show. And the commentator was basically talking about how he was shocked that these police officers would just let him stand there with a rifle, and then they would just walk him to the police car, let him put his own rifle in the back seat of the police car, and let him sit in the front seat of the police car. And this commentator was talking about how they should have arrested him, they should have confiscated his weapon, and so forth. But that's not the case. He has the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. And so the police were actually acting properly in the way they handled that situation. And I believe they acted respectfully to everybody on both sides of the equation, both Allen and also the protesters who were there and so forth. And so I just want to give a shout out to the Charlottesville Police Department and say that at least from what we saw in the video there and from what we've heard of reports and so forth, that that it appears that you acted very professionally and very properly, and just appreciate that. I wish that every time that we spoke of the police that we could do so in glowing terms and never have to be critical. But that's not the reality of the world that we live in. But in this instance, we saw some police officers who truly understand what it is to protect and serve, and we want to thank you for that. And we want to commend you for that. And we also want to kind of take this opportunity to remember that there is kind of a thin blue line out there. There are some good cops out there that without you, our society probably would just go totally into chaos. And so thank you for doing what you do. One more thing that I want to talk about, just because we have a few extra minutes in this broadcast, I want to talk about a program that we've got coming up for 2019. Some of you maybe have been hesitant to advertise on the Dixie Heritage Hour because you're like, well, it's a new radio show. What's going on here? Let me just say this. The Dixie Heritage Hour, we had a 3-month radio contract. And some of the early advertisers were like, are you even going to do the 3 months worth of shows? Not only have we done 3 months of shows, we're pushing a year now. And we're going into next year. We're going into next year strong. Our listenership, our ratings, they go up week after week after week. So we're going to give you an opportunity. If you're wondering, are we going anywhere? No, we're not. We're going forward. And so we want to give you an opportunity to go forward with us. If you'd like to advertise on TBR Radio Presents the Dixie Heritage Hour, we have a program right now where for $200, you can advertise on 12 radio shows. That will be once a month, every month for 12 months in 2019. We will play your commercial. It can be up to 2 minutes long, depending on what the product is. Maybe you already have a commercial in place. Maybe we record the commercial for you. We'll just have to see. But at any rate, it would be $200 for 12 commercials, one every month for 12 months in 2019. Or if you would like a commercial in every Dixie Heritage Hour of 2019, that is 52 commercials, one a week, the cost would be only $800. And again, if you do not have a commercial recorded, there is a possibility that we could record a commercial for you. We do not want to clutter the show up with a ton of commercials, okay? We want to do the long-form interviews. We want to put a lot of content out there for you. We want you to get to hear and get to know our guests. So we don't want to be like Sean Hannity or Mark Levin or Rush Limbaugh, where for every hour that they're on the air, they probably play 25 minutes of commercials. And I'm just throwing those numbers out there. I don't know how many minutes of commercials they put out there, but it's a lot. And it's not all their fault. Some of it is their own commercials. And some of it also is the fact that the stations they're on also want to sell local advertising and commercials as well. But we don't want to clutter the show up with commercials, but we do want to let just a couple of our supporters have the chance to get in and go forward with us and insert some commercials in. So get ahead of this thing. And send me an email, director@dixieheritage.net, and we will get these commercials made for you, and we'll get them inserted into the show. And you can advertise with us, and you can go forward with us into calendar year 2019. So until then, obviously, we're out of time now. From all of us here at TBR Radio Presents the Dixie Heritage Hour, thank you for listening. See you next week. God bless.
Robert E. Lee was a great general. And Abraham Lincoln developed a phobia. He couldn't beat Robert E. Lee. He was going crazy. I don't know if you know this story. But Robert E. Lee was winning battle after battle after battle. And Abraham Lincoln came home. He said, I can't beat Robert E. Lee. And he had all of these generals. They looked great. They were the top of their class at West Point. They were the greatest people.
There's only one problem. They didn't know how the hell to win. They didn't know how to fight. They didn't know how. But Lincoln had almost developed a phobia because he was having a hard time with a true great fighter and a great general, Robert E. Lee.